Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us here today at FLORESCENTLY. Now today we're going to be showing you how to make an everyday arrangement. This is perfect if you want to make a gift for somebody, or maybe you just want to have some flowers in your house, but this is just a common approach to making just an everyday style arrangement. Now you can use lots of different containers, you can do lots of different styles of arrangement with this type of approach, but today I'm going to be using a very common vase called a C999. And I love this vase, I love working with it. It's a good height, it's about 8 inches tall, and it curves outwards. So when you have a vase that kind of curves outwards, that's going to give us kind of a rounded shape overall. So it's very easy to put together. And just as a little hint today, one of the most common questions I get when florists are first starting off is, how tall do you make an arrangement in a vase? And that's a great question. And a good hint that I have that works most of the time really is if you imagine this vase on top of itself again, and then kind of give or take an inch or so. That's going to give you just a basic kind of idea as to how tall this arrangement's going to be. So to get us started today, I'm going to be using one of my favorite greeneries, and it's called Variegated Pit. Now this is one of my favorite types of greenery. I use this all the time in floral design. And it's a very common greenery. You should be able to find it in most flower shops or grocery stores, or really wherever you get your flowers from normally. But what I love about Variegated Pit is that because of its nice long laterals, you can actually cut it in lots of different places and have multiple pieces to use. So I'm going to get us started here today. Notice I've got a nice long piece right here in the center. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. Okay. And one of the things we have to remember is to make sure we take off our excess greenery. We never want to put greens inside the vase or the water or below that water line. It causes things to get moldy, it clouds the water, and your flowers aren't going to last as long. So I always make sure to pull off that excess greenery. And I'm going to go ahead and give my greens a fresh cut. Again, pulling off that excess greenery. And always make sure you give your flowers or greens a nice fresh cut. And you'll see I'm just kind of laying these pieces in here at angles, just so it has kind of a nice balanced feel. And I've got another piece here. Again, we've got a nice spot where we can cut and have multiple pieces. We're going to pull off the excess greenery, fresh cut. And we're just going to kind of make a basic framework for our arrangement. This isn't to fill in completely. It's just enough to give our stem something to lean on as we're designing. You'll see it doesn't take a whole lot to fill in and give us that framework. Again, cutting our stems, pulling off our greens, and I'm just very gently tucking these in, kind of interlocking them. And sometimes you might see like there's a little piece kind of growing down here. We would really prefer to take those off, just so we have a nice clean stem to work with in our arrangement. And again, fresh cut. We're going to go ahead and tuck our greens in. And look very quickly, that was just 3 pieces of Variegated Pit. Don't be afraid to use multiple types of greenery in an arrangement, but I love working with Variegated Pit because of just how much it fills in. And I love that it has that little variegated color texture in there. Just adds a lot of movement to our arrangement. The next piece we're going to do is we're going to put in a few of our secondary flowers. Now there's really a couple of schools of thought with floral design. Some people like to put in their feature flower first, just to kind of get it in place and kind of be able to work around it. That's fine if that works for you. I find though that sometimes in making an arrangement, it's very helpful for me to have more stems in place and then put the feature flower in. So I'm going to show you that approach in this video. And so the first secondary flower I'm working with is called Ultramaria. I love Ultramaria. It has a whole bunch of blooms kind of gathered at the top, and that's really going to fill in a good deal of space in our arrangement. And when you're trying to save a little bit of money and kind of put something more full together, it's good to go with something like Ulstro just because it will fill in a great deal. And the other thing I love about Ulstro is that it's long lasting. So if you can get it at a more closed stage, it's going to last a long time for you and you can enjoy watching it open. So I'm going to start off today by pulling off my excess greens. We don't want those on there. You can leave the green leaves at the top on if you wish, but I have seen florists who do like to pull those off. We're going to start off today giving a fresh cut. And don't be afraid to cut a multiple multiple times, because you definitely cut more off. You can't put more stem back on. And I'm just going to start off by just filling in around the edges, working my way towards the center. Again, excess greens are coming off. And don't be afraid to move things around. I think sometimes we get a little worried that, oh, if I move something, it's going to offset everything. Don't be afraid to give things a try. I'm going to go ahead and put some in the front here, kind of fill in that space. Again, we're just adding to the framework of the arrangement, making sure our color is balanced out within the arrangement. There we go. And look how quickly, I mean, this is really filling in. We haven't even gotten to the rest of our flowers yet, and already this is looking very nice and full and beautiful. Again, make sure we're pulling those greens off. Sometimes things like to move on you. You will discover the more you design that things like to move out of place, and that can be very frustrating. Just be patient. Everything will go in its place at the right time. But I know that's something that definitely frustrated me at first when I was doing floral design. But once we get all of our Austro in there, look how nice and full that is already. And again, Austro is a very versatile secondary flower. It comes in lots of different colors, so don't be afraid to see what colors you like best with your arrangement. So now that I have kind of more of a better framework in place, now I'm going to go ahead and put in my feature flower. And today I'm going to be working with sunflowers. Now sunflowers are, again, usually readily available. They tend to be available year-round in most places, so you shouldn't have too hard of a trouble finding them. But what I love about sunflowers is, again, how much space they're going to take up in our arrangement. They have such a large head to them that it's only going to take a couple of stems of these to really make a big impact. And one thing to remember with your feature flower is it's going to be the most impactful, and it's going to be the one our eye is drawn to the most. So we're going to want to make sure to put it in places where it's going to have the biggest impact. Also want to point out that with sunflowers, with a flower like this that has such a heavy head to it, we're going to want to wire it just to kind of give it some more support. So I'm going to show you very quickly how to wire, and we're just going to go ahead and poke our 24 gauge wire into our stem, making sure we don't poke out through the top. We don't want to go too far, but then we're just going to gently and carefully wrap our sunflower with our wire, and that's just going to give it just a little bit more support and kind of keep that head straight longer for us. It also gives it a little bit of flexibility, so if we wanted to kind of put the head in a certain position, we could do that. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give a fresh cut. And I'm going to start off today by putting my first sunflower here right towards the center, just off to the side there. And I'm going to be using 3 beautiful sunflowers. When working with feature flowers, it's a good idea to work in odd numbers, just because it's going to have the most visual impact, and it also just gives the arrangement a little bit of movement. So again, I am wiring my sunflowers, making sure those are going to be nice and supported. Again, giving fresh cuts. Always give your flowers a fresh cut. That end starts to seal up within a minute of being out of water. You definitely want to make sure it's going to be able to drink well. And I'm going to be working a triangle shape. That's kind of one of the easiest kind of shapes to doing an everyday arrangement. That way everybody has a spot, everything's visible, and it's well balanced. So my last sunflower here, I'm going to go ahead and wire it real quick, making sure it's nice and tight around there, but not too tight. You don't want to press so hard that it presses into the flesh of the stem. Give me a fresh cut. I'm going to go right over here off to the side. So very quickly you can see it's coming together beautifully. Again, don't be afraid to move things around. It's okay when you're doing floral design. Sometimes things shift on you while you're designing, so make sure everything's staying in place where you want it before you move forward. All right, so we've got our feature flowers in place. Let's go ahead and add a few other secondary flowers. And my next one is one of my favorite go-tos for a secondary flower. It's one I use quite often in floral design, and it's called spray rose. Now, a spray rose or a miniature rose, I've heard it a couple different ways. It's called that because you'll notice there's one long stem, but then there's several longer laterals. So typically any flower that has long laterals like this is considered a spray. but today we're going to use it to kind of add a pop of bright orange color to our arrangement. These are called Orange Babe, and I love working with these because they have such a nice large head. They're a multi-petaled rose and they open up really nice and full for us. So again, I've got 3 stems of these, so I'm going to work in kind of a triangle shape so everything is nice and balanced out. One of the neat things with working with spray roses is that with those laterals you can kind of bend and kind of move your stems wherever you need to. So if you want to spread out the spray roses a little bit to give them a little bit more presence, you can very easily do that. So I've got my first stem in there. Again, I'm pulling off that excess foliage. We don't want that below the water line. And if you ever have any bad petals on roses or spray roses, you want to make sure you pull those off very gently. We don't want those to be attached. Those can often, if they're already starting to mold, can kind of lead the rest of the flower to mold. So we pull those off. Give a nice fresh cut. I'm going to go ahead and turn this real quick so I can see. And there are lots of secondary flowers to work with. You'd be surprised there are just so many to choose from, and they're called secondary not because they're not very pretty, but because they're just the flowers that kind of fill in around in an arrangement and kind of just give support to the feature flowers. So make sure whatever secondary flowers you're working with, make sure they go along with the feature flower you're using. Nice fresh cut. And again, I've got my triangle shape. I'm just going to go ahead, fill in. I'm going to move around. Oh, I found a flower here that's got a couple of moldy petals. I'm going to pull those off. Definitely make sure you pull those off because they can spread that to other flowers. We definitely don't want that to happen. All right. And so we have our spray roses in place. Now the last flower we're going to be working with is called Mini Carn, short for mini carnations. And these little guys, they're just so fun. I know carnations tend to have kind of a bad stigma as being a cheaper flower, and generally they do tend to be on the cheaper side, but they are very long lasting and they tend to have a very beautiful fresh scent. So this is a great one to use if you want your flowers to last as long as possible. But again, we're working with a spray because we have these nice long laterals, and we can actually cut those in different places to get a couple more stems. So wherever you see kind of a lateral coming together at the stem, that's a good place to cut. And now we have 2 stems that we can work with. Now if you want your carnations to kind of take up a little bit more space, you can kind of tease them open a little bit just by giving them a nice little touch. I'm going to give a nice cut. And with this last secondary flower, I'm just going to kind of fill in and just kind of put this color all throughout the arrangement, making sure it's nice and balanced. And I have to say this is probably one of my favorite combinations for floral design. I love using the orange and yellow and hot pink. It just looks so beautiful together. It has such a vibrant look to it, and right now with summer, this is a great choice. But don't be afraid to try other combinations, of course. Make sure you use whatever it is you want to try out. So very quickly you're going to see that it only takes a few stems of Mini Carn to fill in. I'm going to go ahead and make another cut so I have a few more pieces. And actually with this one I could even cut again and have 3 pieces to work with. It's one of the nice reasons why I love using Mini Carns is because they are so versatile and you can cut them in so many different ways to put them into your arrangement. And sometimes you might have to fight a little bit to get them in there. But again, I'm just kind of turning, making sure I'm covering all my spots. Sometimes when you're doing floral design, the flowers can get kind of pushed down. Don't be afraid to pull back up and see how that has made a big difference just by doing that. That's given my arrangement the volume I was looking for. So I'm just going to take a few more of these, just enough to bring that hot pink color throughout the arrangement. Making sure I'm doing my nice fresh cut. Make sure we're taking off our excess greenery. We don't want that in there. In addition, when you take off that extra greenery or those troublesome smaller stems, it allows you to make adjustments easier. So if you need to pull a stem out, you're not taking a whole bunch of stems with it because there's all these greens bringing everything with it. It's a great way to help minimize the stress of that a little bit. maybe just a couple more here. Make sure I'm pulling up. Excellent, making sure everything's nice and balanced. We'll add just a touch more hot pink right in this area here. And there you have it. This is how you make an everyday arrangement. Now don't be afraid to try other combinations, to try other feature flowers that you want to experiment with other secondary flowers, or even some real fun fillers. That's part of the fun of floral design, is figuring out what you like to work with. And this is just kind of a basic way to approach doing an everyday arrangement. But hopefully this episode has been helpful for you. Thank you so much for joining us here today at Fluorescently, and we look forward to designing with you.